Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Welcome to our monthly recap episode. Look at the last 20 or so episodes. I do desire to make the hobby less complicated, and sometimes hearing from different sources gives you a perspective that helps you. So thank you, sponsors: Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC.com, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stay Sports Cards, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Heritage Auctions, Panini, Upper Deck, and Topps. Starting with episode 359, that was an ownership transition for our company. Is the buzz about PSA being sold, taken private, but back in the day, Beckett Publications was sold first from me to one group, and then that group moved on to another. Bill Sutherland was present at both of those, especially involved at the second one. And so I was interested in discussing that with him, and I got something out of it. I hope you did too. 359A was just the continuation. Once I get going with some of these guys, I'll keep the recorder going, and it's not off the record, but it's not necessarily packaged into a full episode. So it's fun to keep going with Bill in 359A. 359B was outtakes from Hobby Hotline. Usually on the outtakes, I'm going to try to give you what the outtakes are about, but sometimes it's just more general. Hobby Hotline, highly recommended Saturday morning live show, rotating guests. It's fast moving. And so there probably are several topics that come up in pretty rapid fire. It moves along. It's worth digging into the whole show, but I pulled out some of the things that I said that I think were not duplicative of things I've said before, and I hope you found that helpful. 360 was the recap. Skip that. Well, you don't have to skip it, but I'm going to skip it. 361 was the 88 Upper Deck, not a misprint. Upper Deck actually was extremely active the year before they came out in the mass market, and really changed the face of collecting with their upscale product. Rich and I were around. We knew each other. He was not on our team. We had a much smaller team in those days, but remember how that happened. 362 was Dick Allen's tribute. Really sad players that I watched that I really thought were really excellent players. Not all of them in the Hall of Fame, but Dick Allen probably should be in the Hall of Fame. That was just something I put together pretty quickly. And yet it's sad that it takes somebody to die before you give them that greater scrutiny, and I hope we did that justice. 363 was the Kids Crate, kids ideas from Joe Paulke, who is a coach and a teacher. It was great to go back and forth with him. He's actually interacting with kids instead of talking about hypotheticals. So that was fun for me, and I hope there were some good ideas that the card companies could pick up on. We need to keep generational transfer going. 364 was a 2.0 dueling questions with Dane Conan at Dynasty Breaks. I just have to tell you, the second dueling questions, well, if the first dueling question goes pretty well, and somebody has some additional questions, and I think it would still be of interest, I've thrown open the door for a second round of dueling questions. So Dane had some good questions for me, and hopefully vice versa. 364A was the 2020 Topps baseball reviews of Chrome Black and Exception. So thank you, Topps, for that. 364B was my slightly whimsical episode, a little melancholy because wax on, wax off has a really interesting positive connotation, but it also has taken on a negative connotation. If you're putting the wax on, if you're taking the wax off that was not intended to be there, that's one thing. 365 was the player episode about Shaquille O'Neal, Torsten Bauer, my German friend's favorite player, and how if you're going to pick a player, pick a big one, and pick one that was not only a great player, but has very visible and just a big personality. I think his cards are moving up a little bit, so people recognize a great player, and he's still in the public eye, and he's funny. 366, the baseball magic years. That was Rich's idea. We went back and forth on that. Pretty heavy emphasis on 68 Tigers. Got good feedback, not just from Tiger fans, but from those who said, hey, what about my team? What about the magic year for my team? Now, this is different from doing dynasties. Rich and I may do some dynasties, or I may do some dynasties with somebody else when it's not just a magic year, but a magic decade, like for the Celtics, or the 4 or 5 years for the Oilers in Edmonton, or the Islanders. And people were saying, what about football magic years or basketball magic years? So everything's up on the board. As always, if you've got ideas and suggestions for topics and guests, you can email me at doctorjamesbeckett@gmail.com. 367 was the dueling questions with Ken Capel. Again, a 2.0. Same deal. I felt like I had a reasonable rapport with Ken, as I did with Dane. And when he had some additional questions, I said, well, let's just package that into a dueling question so we can go back and forth, and it won't just be one person talking the whole time, but we'll share the mic. Actually, we had 2 mics, and it was remote. We're doing Zoom. 368 was the 73 Topps Baseball with Rich Klein. Rich and I are on a roll with some of the episodes that deal with top sets of the late 60s, early 70s. And so I'm sure we'll continue that and do those periodically and work our way back as well as work our way forward. 369 was Dueling Questions with Kevin O'Keefe. I had enjoyed the previous episode with Kevin, and the Dueling Questions is an interesting format and it's fun for me because I have no idea what they're going to ask, and they have no idea what I'm going to ask them. And I'm trying to ask different questions to different people that I think will shed light on issues or perspectives that will be helpful to you, the listener. 369A was the outtakes on Post and Jell-O, those difficult cereal and consumer packaging cards that needed to be cut out with Ken Marks. Ken, again, about my age. And as we were talking, we did the episode and we just kept going. So I thought, I'm going to package that up. There were some insights in there I thought would be helpful. 369B was the outtakes on the PSA buyout benefits, again, from Hobby Hotline. That was more of an extended conversation, and it shows why I'm trying to do some of these outtakes. The way the conversation goes depends on who's involved in the conversation. That's the same thing as in your daily life. So in Hobby Hotline, sometimes those things are motivated by another host or by one of the people that call in. It comes at it from a different angle. That was a good example of an extended conversation that played out in a way that was different than some of the things that I had said before. Great fun on Hobby Hotline. 370 was Rich and I pulled this together pretty quickly. Phil Spector, I don't think he was in great health, but I didn't know that he was near death, and he passed away. And just a great guy, a good friend, very helpful and always cheerful to bump into him at the Nationals and other shows where I saw him over the decades. Rich felt the same way. So that was 370. 371 were the outtakes from Hobby Hotline again. And this was a little bit longer go, and it was a fun thing. I talked about Star Stock before, but this was about the new investors, the Kevin Durant and the AJ Vaynerchuk coming in and making somewhat of a splash. And I thought that was worth bringing it to the full audience. So that was a whole episode. Thanks to Hobby Hotline for provoking that and bringing up that topic, again, in a different way than what I've done before. 372 was the Cleveland baseball. If they're not going to be the Indians, what are they going to be? Rich and I just had a chance to speculate. Again, this brings up the disclaimers that every show should have, is that the opinions that I have are not necessarily Rich's. The opinions that Rich has are not necessarily mine. And we're certainly not speaking for any of the sponsors, including Beckett Media. We're speaking for ourselves. And even that, some of the things we're saying are just speculation, and we're not trying to be inaccurate, but who knows? We'll see what happens, and Rich and I both had some ideas about that. 373 was the deferred gratification episode. I want to do something a little different for Christmas Eve. So the day before, I just think, what are my Christmas Eve memories? I remember being in great anticipation of what I was going to get for Christmas the next morning, because we were Christmas morning openers back when I was a kid. I had to learn deferred gratification. I had to learn to wait, learn to watchfully wait and be prepared to tear into the presents that following morning. But in life and in the hobby especially, being able to defer your gratification, to be able to wait, is a skill that will be fruitful for you in terms of saving you money or making you money in many cases. And again, I did have a disclaimer in there about one of ones and things like that. 374 was the unsolicited gifts. Perhaps I'm the only one that has this problem. I've gotten a lot of unsolicited gifts over the years, and it's just awkward. Again, I really appreciate it. And if you're in that same situation and you don't have a problem with that, well, just accept the gift. I guess I really do live by it's better to give than to receive. So I'm more comfortable giving than receiving, but I need to be not just a cheerful giver, but a cheerful receiver. 374A, outtakes with Dave Slipka. Dave's one of the good guys in the hobby, a real hobby stalwart. I always enjoy talking to Dave when we're doing an episode, and then we might keep going. And there's just some other good stuff. Dave's just a really sharp guy. He's worn so many hats in our industry as I have, and so we can go back and forth, and we've worked together for a long time. 374B, it probably is an annual tradition, but it's not a fun annual tradition. It's good to remember people, but it's better to remember them when they're alive. And 2020 was probably arguably the worst year ever for Baseball Hall of Famers passing away, for people passing away. It just was a really tough year. 375, the Major League Baseball decision to include the Negro Leagues in the stats and give them standing for that. And I believe there are hobby implications that will shake out, and I believe they'll be positive. I think there's some additional players and that ought to be brought to light. And I think Rich and I enjoyed talking about that. That's a part of the history of baseball, and to be more inclusive, that's a decision that's been made, and we'll see how the card companies deal with that in a way that is good. 376, another sad to report, but Josh Evans of Leland's passed away. He was known to be sick, but It's just 2020's been a terrible year. But I can assure you from everything I know, Leland's, the auction house that he co-founded, will continue to thrive. It's got his fingerprints on it. And Michael Hefner and the other teammates are committed. And I know I've got a couple of other auction sponsors, and I can't speak for them, but I hope Leland's does well. They certainly have a niche in the industry, and I hope they continue to do well in spite of losing their visionary, inspiring co-founder. 377 was the Pro Football Hall of Fame semifinalists, just a list of 25 guys. And I saw them play. Rich saw them play. And Rich and I go back and forth on things, and it's in a marriage or in a friendship. My concept is that in most cases, husband and wives or friends agree on about 90% of the stuff. So the real question in your marriage or in your friendship is how do you handle the other 10%? And my wife and I, as well as Rich and I, handle those disagreements very amicably and with respect. So Rich and I don't always agree, but we generally agree. And when we don't, we hash it out. So that's a positive. And then finally, the 378 was the year in review last year, 2020, with Mike Fruitman. And I want to get Mike on every once in a while, and he is on every once in a while. So he gives generally a very positive LCS, local card shop focus, as well as the broader hobby. But we were able to go down the months, the last 12 months, of see how amazing it's been from Kobe passing in late January, and then February, then all of a sudden March, COVID really hitting and shutting everything down, and how the local card shops dealt with it, as well as the hobby. Brief hiccup there, but then it was onward and upward. So don't know what 2021 is going to hold. I actually have some other episodes talking about last year as well as optimism for this year. Mostly it is optimism for this year. So still enjoying doing this. If you've got feedback for me, as I said, you can email me, because I've got a bunch more episodes I'm going to do with doing one every day. Again, I don't think I'm going to run out of topics, but I want to be definitely listening to those of you who have some great ideas as well. And I can either mix them in, because again, there's no pattern here, but I'm going to continue the tributes. I'm going to continue to do the outtakes. I'm going to continue to do some of these other card related ones and player related ones and historical ones. So again, thanks for listening. I wouldn't be doing it if no one was listening. Appreciate you listening and telling your friends if you think they'd enjoy it, pass it on. So thanks again. Happy New Year. Talk to you tomorrow.